Today is Friday, December 2nd, 2022. Thank you to Cary Library for their help and cooperation in presenting today's program. Assisted listening devices are available here if anyone needs one. This program is the third in the 2022-2023 First Friday Forum series hosted by the League of Women Voters to promote awareness and understanding of public policy issues. There will be time for question and answer after the program. LexMedia is recording today's program. It will be available in the next few days on demand on their website, lexmedia.org. All League forums are free and open to the public. We are pleased today to introduce Representative Ken Gordon, 21st Middlesex. Ken was elected to the newly formed 21st District when Precinct 6 of Lexington was incorporated into that district. He will be joining our current delegation of Senator Mike Barrett, Representative Michelle Sokola, who is with us today in the audience, and Representative Cindy Friedman at State House in January. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to the principles of self-government established in the Constitution of the United States. For more information about the Lexington League, go to my.lwv.org/Massachusetts.Lexington. That's very confusing. Or just Google us or contact me. And if anyone would like to join the League, please contact us also. Our next First Friday will be January 6th, 2023, 9:30 a.m. in the same room at Cary Library. The forum will feature Lexington's Planning Director, Abby McKay, and Robert Peters, Chair of the Lexington Planning Board, speaking on zoning and MBTA communities. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ken.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I'd like to start off this way. I have been a state representative now for 5 terms, for 10 years, and I've represented what we call the 21st Middlesex District, which up until next month includes the towns of Bedford and Burlington, and has included Precinct 3 in Wilmington. I ran for this office 10 years ago, never having run for a political office before, never thinking I would ever run for a political office when I decided that day to do so, because my predecessor was not running for re-election, and now it's a little late in the game that he wasn't running for re-election. So it wasn't really anticipated that the seat would be open. There were a few people who were running at that time. I was looking for something a little different. The reason I was looking for something a little different, and they're all very nice people, by the way, but I think to be a candidate running for the legislature, I think the candidate needs to understand how important this role is. I'm a lawyer. I'm an employment lawyer. I represent victims of discrimination. And when I go to work every day as an employment lawyer, which I still do, though not every day because of the legislative role, what we do is we use the laws that the legislature passes. They're very important. And we need to understand how important the structure of our legislature and our government is. So what I was looking for was a candidate who first of all had good ideas, because if you don't agree with their ideas, then you're not going to support that candidate for sure. But the second thing was someone who had the background and the quality, something in what they've done to demonstrate that they were prepared to actually have a plan to do what they say they want to do. Because it's one thing, obviously, to say, this is what I'm going to do. And it leaves open the question, well, how are you going to do it as a first-year representative? There are 160 representatives. When you start in the beginning, you obviously aren't going to just go in and tell everybody what they've been doing is wrong and change everything. A few years ago, I moderated a debate, and I believe it was sponsored by the League of Women Voters here in Lexington. And it was for the open seat when Jay Kaufman retired. And there was a candidate, Michelle Sokola. Michelle's laughing because I told her this. She was the candidate in that race who put those two things together, like I thought none other, and they were very good candidates. But if I was to have lived in Lexington, and I was looking for someone that I knew how to do the things that she said she wanted to do, that was Michelle Sokola. And I told Jay the next day, I know who your successor is going to be, because people in Lexington are smart, and they're going to see the same type of qualities that I see. And I was pretty confident at that point that I knew who I was going to know over the next now, I think 4 years and two terms, 2 sessions that Rep. Sokola has been there. And I say that because I'm really looking forward to, we've been working together anyway. We sit in the same, what we call division. We communicate all the time. We strategize all the time. During COVID, because we're in the same division, we were often on the same conference calls and all that. We've been very close in our working relationship. To be able to team with Rep. Sokola in standing up for Lexington is really an honor, and I'm excited about doing that. And that's why I wanted to start off my remarks by pointing that out. You have a tremendously wonderful representative. So was Rep. Kaufman. But right off the bat, Rep. Sokola, because of her experience in planning, because of her experience on the select board, she knew if I'm going to get something done, I've got to have a plan to do it, because it's not a legislature of one person.
And she's getting those things done.
And she's doing it, right. The fact is she's doing it. That's exactly right. Now, as I said, my district has been, I have 2 towns entirely. I live in Bedford, and I represent Burlington. The population of Burlington is about 28,000. The population of Bedford is about half that, about 14,000. And a district, all of our districts are about the same size. They've got to be by our constitution. So our district needs about another 2,000 to 3,000 people to be complete. So for 30 or so years, this district has needed another precinct from another town. And in this coming session, it has switched to the Lexington district. I understand that there may be some frustration from some people who live in Lexington who said we had one complete representative that we could all go to with the same issue. And I understand that can be frustrating. But at the same time, to have 2 representatives now who you can go to, I focus on precinct 6. That's the precinct I will be representing. But whenever Michelle needs help, not that it hasn't always been the case, but really now we have this authority of representing the same community that we can go together with 2 voices. I chair the Committee on Public Service from the House side. It's a joint committee, so we have a House and Senate chair. So I have a focus and an assignment on issues that deal with public employment, pensions, healthcare, and civil service. Michelle has focus that she brings to the legislature as well. And in the coming session, I think that you'll see some changes to the role that Michelle would have. And because I think what leadership recognizes the talent and ability that Michelle brings to the legislature. And so there will be 2 areas directly that Lexington will then influence. And that's good for Lexington. I live in Bedford. In fact, I live about a mile from Lexington. I live right behind Lexington Cemetery in that little neighborhood that's behind the Bedford Stop and Shop. And I've lived there for 30 years. And so we, for years, have come to Lexington all the time because we're closer to Lexington Center than we are to the center of any town other than Bedford, which is a small center. So I've always felt connected to Lexington, and politically, as a matter of policy, not political candidate-wise, but as a matter of political policy, our Bedford policies and Lexington's policies, I think, are quite well aligned. So it makes for a district, for me, that's more consistent. There were some wonderful people in Wilmington, but by and large, the views in Wilmington were much more conservative than the views in Bedford, and somewhat more conservative than the views in Burlington. So it makes my district, for me, a voice that's a little bit more united. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. That way I'll sort of take a step back. I was born here in Boston, but I lived for my first year in Quincy. The hospital was in Boston, so technically that's where I was born. But we moved about when I was a small child because my father's job took him from place to place. And I ended up in Connecticut during my school age years. I was in Connecticut, in Ledyard, where Foxwoods Casino is now. I took a dim view of casino gambling for a very large while because Ledyard is a rural community. A casino there changed the face of a rural community drastically. Now, since I've been serving, I realize that the casinos here in Massachusetts are in urban areas, Everett and Springfield, which is actually different. So my view was really focused on the economic impact of the area, whether or not we should be collecting revenue from people's gambling losses is kind of a different issue. But for all of that, I've having experience, having come into the legislature and visiting these areas, my view is a little bit different. But that's where I come from. My mother comes from Quincy, which is why I was here. I started here, and so my family has always been in Massachusetts. And every vacation, we would come to Massachusetts. My parents were divorced, so when summer came, we went to our grandparents in Massachusetts, school vacations and all of that. So I was always as comfortable, even maybe more comfortable in Massachusetts than Connecticut when I was growing up. So when it came time for college, I applied to two places, BU and Northeastern. And I went to Northeastern because I loved the co-op program. It was easier for me to afford college, but also I really took advantage of the opportunity that we had to be able to work and study at the same time. Therefore, it's always been a focus of mine to make sure that that as many people as possible have the opportunity to attend college, and if that's what they want to do. Coming out of, and I was all I wanted to be when I grew up essentially was a newspaper reporter. This was post Watergate. And newspapers had a different reputation than they do now. The media had a different reputation than it does now, earned it or not. It was very, very, very respected post-Watergate. And so I studied journalism. I worked at the Globe for 4 years. And then at the advice of the Globe, they didn't send me. I went to Florida because there wasn't much of an opportunity here because, again, the jobs in journalism were tough to get. It was very competitive. And there were jobs in other places in the country where I could start out, hopefully come back, and that's what I did. I ended up in West Palm Beach. Let me back up just to sort of focus on the person I've become. When I was in college, I was the editor of the student paper. We, for a year, during that year, we engaged in a lot of investigative reporting and enterprise reporting. We found the administration was falling short in certain ways. And when we wrote about that, almost always the administration responded, not by denying everything, or maybe at first, maybe there was a little bit of resistance, but almost always they adjusted their practice to what we had found. And I was impressed with the power of the media in that way to show the public this is what's going on and to get change. So when I got to Florida, I was a sports writer, but I always found opportunities to go back to the investigative area, especially in the summer, because back in the middle 80s, there was not much going on in the summer in Florida. So that's when I would define a project for myself. And one of the things I did was I wrote about sports agents who were getting students in trouble, schools in trouble, breaking the law, really. The result of a series I did the last summer I was there was that or maybe an indirect result was that agents started to go to jail. They started to get prosecuted for what they were doing. I won. The direct result was that I was honored by the Associated Press and won a national AP award. Folks at the University of Miami, who I was writing about, essentially to protect, suggested that I go to law school, suggested that maybe I think about representing the interests of people who were being victimized rather than exposing in a public way why they were being victimized. And I thought, well, that would actually be something that I would really like to do, is stand up for other people who were having issues. Maybe just as much, I could go back to Boston that way, which is really where I belonged and felt most comfortable. So I applied for law school and I came back to Boston. Long story short, I ended up not in the sports area, but staying in the employment area, because sports representation is employment. But I represented people with more traditional forms of employment just because I felt better about that. And my focus for a while was I still do sexual harassment, people who are victims of sexual harassment. I still represent people who are victims of discrimination and other forms of wrongful termination. So that's why 10 years ago, I was helping Mike Barrett, our state senator, when he was running for the first time, because like Rep. Sokola, when I talked to him at a Starbucks, I saw that he had a plan. First of all, he had experience because he was a senator prior to him running in our district. So he knew what to expect. He knew how to get people together. He knew how to build a coalition, which is what you need. Again, he knew you can't just tell everybody, you can't essentially push everybody around when you first get into a community of any sort and expect that people are just going to stop and say, oh, okay, we'll do it that way. He had a plan. And so I was working with him, and it was fun. And he was so intelligent. He is so intelligent. And then the seat came open, and I told you the rest of that story and why and how I ran in that race. It was a write-in campaign. I didn't run, frankly, expecting to win. It was a very quick campaign, but I tried as hard as I could, and obviously did it, and I'm there. So since I've been there, I have filed some of the bills I've filed that I'm most proud of. Is I've focused on the rights of parents, especially parents of young children. And so 6 years ago now, maybe 8, time flies, but maybe 6 years ago, I helped to draft and filed the bill that became the paid family and medical leave law that we have here in Massachusetts. I worked on that for 4 years. It's a policy that the Obama White House, this was when President Obama was in the White House, they prioritized. And so shortly after I started working on this bill, together with coalitions outside the State House that prioritized this as well, we were invited to the White House to collaborate with other states that were trying to get the same program in. There were about 8 states, and the White House identified 8 states, I should say, and we were fortunate to be one of them. So we came in every other month, put our ideas out there. The way that the White House explained it was we were building a big Lego set. He said, you all put the pieces in place, and then take back to your state what you can use. Take the Lego pieces out if it doesn't fit with what you want to do, but whatever you put in, keep it there so that another state can get the benefit of the idea that you brought to the table, as well as the federal government contributing what they could too. And again, it just goes back to this collaborative way that I think we can get things done and do get things done. So we were able to do that. The federal government, for their part, there was a meeting here in Cambridge where the Labor Secretary, Tom Perez, Labor Secretary at that time, said, what can we do? And I suggested there are startup costs with this Lego set. Those pieces that are common to every single state, the obvious things, if the federal government can just put it out there in an open platform that we could digitally connect to, it would save millions of dollars and times the number of states trying to do this, tens, maybe $100 million because of the repetitiveness of why should we all be inventing the wheel? And that's what they did. So in partnership with the ideas from other states and the federal government, we became one of the two because the state of Washington was on the same track as Massachusetts. And within a month, we both passed this program, and they're very similar to each other. You won't be surprised because we worked on it together. And they're finding both programs are very successful. Both have startup issues because they would. It's a very complex program. There are 4 states that had a program like this: California, Rhode Island, a couple others. But they came out of surplus funds from after the New Deal, when Social Security came about. The states were entitled to spend some of that extra money in certain ways, and 4 states went to a program like this. But they're based on aging platforms, on aging data. They're not like what we have. And they're making strides to get better. But that's what, I don't mean to say that wrong, because when I met with those states, they said, your advantage is you're starting now and you can do it all right now. And so, and so we're doing that. So those states are doing as best they can as well. But I'm really proud of that program that we have developed and that's helping people right now. I think, this is a program where parents of young children, newborns, and newly adopted children, foster children can take up to 12 weeks to be with their new family from work at a percentage of their pay. They can take up to 20 weeks to recover from an illness or an injury, and they can take time to be with family members who are hospitalized or returning from the military. When we finished that in 2018, the same advocacy group that we had been working together, the folks from Raise Up Massachusetts, the Coalition for Social Justice specifically, because Raise Up Massachusetts is a coalition of many groups, but the Coalition for Social Justice came back and said, the reward for hard work is more hard work, that kind of thing. So that was successful. What are we going to do now? And I told him, I think we ought to start where that ended, which is at the end of 12 weeks in Massachusetts, young families of newborns and newly adopted children now need childcare, because unless there's a family member accessible to them, the price of childcare in Massachusetts is out of the reach of most working people. It's a non-starter for most working people because in many instances, the lower wage earner, because if someone's going to have to stay home from work, it's going to be the one making less, obviously. The lower is making less than what childcare costs. It makes no sense. I'm an example of that, but I'm just an example of that. I'm no different. My family is no different than other families here in Massachusetts, where what my wife was earning was barely more than what childcare costs on the open market kind of thing. And it made no sense. We might as well be with, if she wanted to be, she might as well be with our child early on. Preschool is a different story that we're talking about very early on. And she chose to stay home. When I say she, in most cases, it's the woman in a couple that is making that decision in Massachusetts. That has a very adverse impact on women, because when women get back to the workplace after taking time off, they're behind. We passed a bill a couple of years ago that addresses the impact of that. For example, it's no longer allowed to ask for a salary. What was your salary? What would you take? Now you've got to tell the applicant this is what we pay. But by and large, it still has an adverse impact on women. And so this bill was filed 2 years ago. It's called Common Start Bill. We're going to refile it, just like paid family and medical leave. That took 2 sessions to get through because complex policies are going to take time. And we used that time, the 2 years, wisely. We've got to identify funding for how we're going to do it. But what we're going to do with this bill is we're going to change the way we look at funding early education and childcare, so that what we're going to do is support the providers of early education and childcare directly, so they don't have to worry and depend on enrollments to keep their doors open, so they get some source of funding that way. But then we're going to help the families by giving them a subsidy toward paying for this based on how much they're earning. That was taking into account what they do in the military. That's what happens in the military right here at Hanscom. If the military can do it, we can do it. And the military does it for the very same reason we want to do it, which is they said, we want our employees, this would be military service people, to focus on their job when they're here at work and not wonder if their children are getting the best care at that time. And so they can see that, they know that they're comfortable with it, and that's why we want this program. And so that's what we're doing there. On preschool, when I said that was a different story with very early child care. But children who attend preschool, it's well known, have an advantage over children who don't when they get to kindergarten. And that advantage stays with them in first grade and second grade. It never leaves because they've always got that leg up on fellow students. And so our program helps these preschools because they're important, not only because they help our workforce, help women who want to go back to work, they're helping the children who need preschool education, even if their parent can stay home with them, because there's a second reason why preschool is important for these kids' development. It also helps to stabilize the income that the preschool providers get. And what I mean is the teachers get. They're not paid very much. The turnover is tremendous. That hurts the kids, that hurts the teachers. So this program would stabilize that too. Because to participate in this program, the providers, the schools, have to agree to a certain payment schedule for the teachers so that they get a wage they can live on. So those are some of the things I've filed.
How much is the state asking for, money to be able to distribute the way you?
Right. So that's the part that we're working on this session. The money part is where does it come from? How much is it? I mean, it's about $1.5 billion. That's what this will cost. Other programs cost that much as well. So it's a question of fine. Now let's find the money. Paid family and medical leave. What we did was, and it took 2 sessions, is we came up with a program where the employers pay half, the employees pay half, but employers of businesses that have 25 or fewer employees don't have to pay that half. No one does. So it goes into the pot. So we'll come about to the formula of, we know what it costs, is how do we get the money? Where do we get it?
Is it feasible to take some of the recently passed ballot initiative, because it was transportation and education? Would that come under?
Yeah, I should repeat the question too, because I don't know if folks watching online here. But the question is, can we use some of the ballot question 1 money to help with this program, because it's supposed to go to transportation and education? And it could be. Again, we haven't gotten to the point where we've determined what the best source of funding would be, because that money has to be stretched too, right? We've got to help. We've got to help our public schools, especially in cities that are really, that need the money, that have been under challenge. So there are many places where that money needs to go. So we'll consider it, and that's what we'll be doing in this current. That's the challenge in this session, to answer that question. So I'll move on a little bit to, and then I'll just take questions. But so part of our focus is the bills that we filed, and we filed several more. But I think those are actually, I got one more to tell. And then I'll move on to the committee work. This is another one that's really important to me. And I've filed this for several years. We call it the Defense Against Abusive Waivers Act, and we use the acronym DAWA. And what that focuses on is the instances where people get to work and they're given a series of documents to sign, tax documents, insurance documents, things you would expect on your first day of work. No problem. Remember, these are people who are either getting a better job or they're finding work after a gap in employment, and they're excited. Your first day of work, people are generally excited, and you generally aren't reading carefully everything that you're being asked to sign, because you assume it's boilerplate and it's what everybody else signs anyway. Well, among the documents that many people are asked to sign are waivers of important rights that deal with issues that haven't happened yet. And that's what this bill addresses. And what I mean by that is that there are often statements, let's say you work for a company that's based in another state, okay? And then let's say they employ people from different states. It's very common that they're going to say that the laws, that if there's any dispute that comes out of this employment relationship, then the laws of, let's say, Texas apply to this employment relationship. What that means is that, remember I started by telling you, it's important to me that we pass protections for employees from things like discrimination and sexual harassment and things like that. We do have a very good set of laws here in Massachusetts. But by signing that, the employee says, well, but that doesn't pertain to me, because I now am protected by, in my example, the Texas employment laws, because I signed that away. And the Supreme Court says you can do that, as if we have a contract, the employer and the employee, and as if they both have what we call arm's length or equal bargaining leverage. And everybody knows that's not true, but you can do that. You can also, it's very common, they'll say, let's say it's Texas, I'm just using that as an example. They'll say, and if there's a dispute, you agree to use the courts of Texas. Now you live here, and let's say this is a job where you were paid $20 an hour or something like that, and then you're sexually harassed by your boss. So what you've agreed is that the Texas laws apply to sexual harassment. What you've agreed is that if you're going to bring a claim, you have to go to Texas to do it. Not many victims of sexual harassment in Massachusetts are going to be able to do that. It's one of the first things I do as an employment lawyer is I say, can I see your employment agreement? Because that's where you're going to find this. And it's very common to find this. The other thing that's common to find is it says, and I agree as to any dispute that comes out of this relationship, that I will agree to binding arbitration before the whatever, AAA, American Arbitration Association, or another mediation or arbitration forum. I'll agree to that. So you've waived your right to a jury trial, effectively by signing that. Now, President Obama, by executive order, has negated that and says that's unenforceable, which is good for now. But as you know, executive orders last as long as the president's in the White House. So it's still an opportunity for us to say that workers shouldn't have to waive their right to litigate a claim that happens here by signing something that they didn't even realize they were signing, because really they were just getting to work and looking forward to their next paycheck or looking forward to the challenge of their next job. So it's been really important to me. It's especially important now. And by the way, this was included in the economic development bill that passed the House, and it was being considered in the conference committee. But then I think many of you know what happened was there was a provision in a law called Chapter 62F that returned a lot of money to the taxpayers because we reached a certain level of revenue. And it caused us to have to stop and look at how much money do we have now to distribute out, because we certainly had less than we thought we had. So we passed sort of a bare bones bill. We took out the policy, and this got taken out. But there was enough interest that it got that far. And I think in the next session, we'll be able to pick it up again because of the interest. It wasn't taken out because there was a disagreement over it. It was taken out because all of these policy things got taken out. So I think it's important now. I think it's important now where the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade, because I think that we can expect there are going to be some states that are going to create crimes, including felonies, of things that are legal here in Massachusetts, and we will keep legal here in Massachusetts. But if somebody can get fired because they're involved in a crime as defined by another state, then that's something that we need to step into and protect that person from. If someone isn't protected from discrimination on the basis of gender or the person they love, the life they live, and we do here in Massachusetts because we do, then we need to step in and do something about that. And as I said, there's no opposition substantively that I've come across. It's just a question of we need to do what we can to get that economic development bill through without getting a lot of objection to it. Question from Mabel.
Representative Gordon, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. You talked about being discrimination, not that because who I am, I'm asking.
That's okay.
Is there a conflict of interest being representative and then also work as a discrimination lawyer?
So Mabel's asking me if there's a conflict of interest between being a state representative and also representing victims of discrimination. Is that right? Or being a lawyer? So I don't think there is. There are many lawyers that work in the State House, and each of us has a particular area that we focus on, because that's what lawyers do. By ethical rule or statute, when we get to court, we can argue a case before a judge. We can't, for example, wear a House of Representatives button into court or make an issue of the fact that we serve in the legislature. Not that I think it would matter, because we're talking to a judge that has a status in and of itself.
But you're also responsible for passing certain laws
Yeah.
in Massachusetts. That's what I'm seeing, being conflict of interest.
So the conflict, so Mabel's asking, is there a conflict that we're passing certain laws? So this is just the ethical rules of it all. If I passed a law that benefited just me directly, then absolutely, I would probably have to recuse myself. There's another body of law that affects the general population of people that have something in common. For example, public colleges. So my son is in a public college, and in the budget we fund public college, right? So what I do is I disclose. I have a filing that says my son is in a public college, but my one vote isn't going to particularly influence, or I should say it differently because it might. This is such it's an area of general interest, not just me. And so this is in the category of things in a general interest that we're benefiting all people in a whole population, which is to say all of the public colleges. So all I do in that case is I just disclose that there would be a very indirect benefit when we give money to the public colleges. That means that the students have to pay that much less because the taxpayers are paying that much of the portion of the expenses of running the college. So in a very indirect way, it would affect the bill that I pay on behalf of my son, that he pays what he happens to get from me. But it's very general in nature. So really the question that you're asking is a general in nature question. So that's the answer I can give you. It's been determined that as long as we're in court, that there's no conflict of interest, that we can be in court, and that the subject matter is, and it is not, doesn't create a conflict. And I might suggest to you that having the real world experience of litigating in a certain area and representing the interests of people in a certain area actually helps me to determine what is right and most just in that area, because I know what's happening in that area. So to me, I think it's been helpful. So you had a question? Okay, sorry.
Representative Gordon, thank you for your comments. And as retired pediatricians, your comments about early education and child care and family medical leave is music to our ears. I'd like to turn to a slightly different topic that you mentioned, your interest in sports, and perhaps even a conflict of interest issue. Sports betting is on the rise.
Right.
One of your districts, Burlington, is the home of one of the two fastest growing sports betting companies in the country. And we see sports betting over our TV screens all over the place. Sports betting is an addictive behavior.
Right.
There is an important role for the state that has to do with, one of the things that I understand is that the nature of the ads is the responsibility of the state to minimize that. Now, as I've been watching the myriad number of sports betting ads that have come, I don't see anything that would be diminishing either the nature of the ad. They're giving away freebie things. You pay $1 and you get whatever it is. It's stupid. And lots of children, as well as other Massachusetts people, watch those sports betting ads. So in terms of conflict of interest, your district has the biggest, one of the biggest sports betting people. But what is Massachusetts going to do to minimize the impact of this now new scourge that's going to create a lot of challenges going forward in the addictive behavior area, as the way you see it?
Yeah, so the question is about sports betting. And the question is basically, what are we going to do to put controls on sports betting so that it doesn't negatively impact children and people who may have an addictive personality that would allow them to go beyond their means. I'm paraphrasing what you're asking. Massachusetts, we passed sports betting at the end of last session, the last day of the last session. Let me take a step back to put this in context. The Supreme Court, 4 years ago, maybe 5, issued a ruling that found that states could not be denied the opportunity to license sports betting It used to be only Nevada that could do that. New Jersey, which has a lot of casinos, sued the federal government saying that's not fair. We're no different than Nevada. New Jersey won that case when it got to the Supreme Court. So since then, states have introduced sports betting all over the nation. And here in New England, Rhode Island introduced sports betting. New Hampshire introduced sports betting. It's not New England, but New York has sports betting. And I believe Connecticut has sports betting to some extent. It's done a little differently in different places. But we found in Massachusetts that essentially keeping it out. Well, first of all, we found in Massachusetts that our residents who want to be involved in sports betting, who want to bet on sports, are already doing it. Millions of dollars a year are already being bet on sports on apps on their phone based on places in other countries. The Cayman Islands is a popular place for the betting to start. And it's very easy to find that app on your phone. And it's legal to find that app on your phone. The betting part's not legal, but you can easily go to the App Store or the Apple Store, that's what's called, and put it on your phone. And then you connect it to money, to your bank account or credit card, and you can just bet away. And there's no regulation whatsoever on these companies. So what we're faced with is the reality that people from Massachusetts now can either continue to bet illegally online, or they can drive to Rhode Island or New Hampshire, or go to Connecticut or New York. I think you have to go into a place there. But you can bet on your phone legally in these other states. The company, and I'm not sure I'm not sure what you're referring to about my district. One of the two biggest entities that provide for access to sports betting is DraftKings, and they're in Copley Square. But that is the one and two, FanDuel in New York.
I thought they were started in Burlington.
Oh, but yeah, they're in Copley Square. Same issue though. Nevertheless, they're still Massachusetts. And so the issue is sort of what can we do now? A lot like other areas, knowing that this exists, we can't really tamp it down. It's going to happen anyway. And I was the vice chair of economic development in the last session when we were looking into this. We passed it. Well, last, 2 sessions ago. The one that's just ending passed it. The one that ended 2 years ago, I was vice chair of that committee. So we looked at, can we regulate so that we can, for example, protect some college athletes from being approached by bettors, right? And so what we did in this bill was we made it so that you can't bet on certain Massachusetts college games when they're going on in Massachusetts, things like that. Can we regulate the advertising? Because we have, I think there are 6 companies that are signed up to do it. I think it's 6, something like it's multiple companies. And they obviously are going to compete with each other through advertising. That's what will make 1 or 2 successful, and that's what DraftKings has done. So we can regulate to some extent, but the FCC and other organizations that oversee this, have rules as well. And so I can't promise you that you'll see a diminution of the number of ads that you see. It's sort of part of the culture that goes on. And so what we did in the legislature is we had to look at, do we create a system where we can use some of the money through betting to put back into the community? It's happening anyway. I don't think it's a perfect answer. As I said when I talked about Foxwoods being in the town where I grew up, I still don't think that's the best way by far to create revenue. But this money's being bet. This is an industry that exists. And it's a huge industry that exists here in Massachusetts. So do we bring it out into the light? And like you said, can we have a conversation about fixing things that we see as they go wrong? Or if we do nothing, we keep it in the illegal market or go to another state market. Yeah.
No, I take exception to your point of view in the sense that one of the other public health scourges was smoking.
Right.
And then vaping, and eliminating the ability for them to publicly advertise, in mass media, dramatically impacted with a decrease in the use of cigarettes and or vaping by teens and that sort of stuff. So I'm skeptical about that approach. It exists, so therefore we can't do anything about it. I think there's a lot more, and I hope with your interests, you'll do some more in that area to try and fine tune it and to assure that some of the money that's coming in is set directly aside for addiction management programs.
Well, some of the money
addiction
coming
treatment programs.
I directly can tell you some of the money coming in is earmarked for addiction management programs. So that's a yes. And I'll paraphrase so that folks watching can hear if they couldn't before. But it's basically we have, I don't know if we disagree, because I do see your point. We'll have a continuing conversation about the regulation dealing with your point being that when cigarette addiction became something that we addressed, that the inability of advertisers to market through advertising, through commercials and magazines and things like that had a direct effect on ceasing the cessation of smoking. And so we can continue to talk about that point. I'm going to go to you because maybe I get a question, so then I'll go to you. Then I'll come here.
Yeah, I have well, thank you for being here and for talking to us. My name is Natalie Hoytema. I'm a Lexington resident, and I heard you talking about discrimination, and that's something that really resonated with me as I'm like foreign born. I'm a green card holder, and that means that I'm not allowed to vote in Lexington, like local, even like school committee, if you want to use electrical lawnmowers or not, if we're going to raise the taxes or not, I have no say in the matter, let alone for like state or whatever. And I know that I've done a little research, not Bedford, Burlington, but in Lexington, I know that almost 30% of the Lexington residents are foreign born. So I've lived here only for like a couple of years, so I assume there's no like registration of green card holders, so I don't know exactly how many there are, but I'm assuming there's a lot because I've met a lot of them. And I was wondering if there is something that you could do to help this group of green card holders to at least have some say in representation, because especially here in Lexington, the whole American Revolution, the first shot was fired based on like no taxation without representation. And that's kind of how I feel now, as I'm a mom of 3, all in the school system here, and I try to support the community. I volunteer in the community. I try to shop local, do all kinds of things. I really want to build a life here and be part of the community and support and help build the community. But I think last year, 2 years ago, the school committee board was up for like you could choose. And that's when I realized, I cannot even vote for that. Well, my kids are in the school system, and I would love to be able to at least have some say in how my 3 kids who are in the school system are, how that's gonna evolve and what matters to me. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and
Okay.
if there would be some support for this, I think, reasonably group in Lexington and maybe Bedford and Burlington as well, that face that issue.
Okay, so the question is that you're a green card holder and you would like the ability or the access to be able to vote as a green card holder because you feel that your life is impacted by the decisions that are made by government officials and that you really don't have the ability to vote for those government officials. Okay, so I think really the heart of the question is our immigration laws. And because if we're to make laws dealing with people who are not yet citizens but have a permanent green card status, that would affect our immigration system. So I think your question, I think we can contact together Congressman Clark, but it's really a federal issue because it deals with immigration as much as, or probably more than, it deals with voting.
Can you explain to me how that's immigration is involved in that?
Yeah, because the fact that the reason that you have a green card is that you came to by the way, thank you for coming to this country, because it makes our country better and it enriches the culture of all of us. And I'm really, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And I'm really proud that we live in a place that should be. I know it's an ideal we don't live up to. I get that many people who come are made to not feel welcome by certain people or elements. I get that. But I'm hoping that overall that we can, as a government, make sure that that's not the case. Again, I think we're falling short of that on the federal government side. But in Massachusetts, I hope we don't. For that reason, the issue is not, I think the biggest issue that you're bringing up is the rights that green card residents have before they're sworn in as citizens. And so the laws that we would pass to affect that, the immigration system is run by the federal government. And it's because you have a green card and not
there's like
citizen.
federal, but there's also like a local issues. There's local voting. There's and I'm not saying I want to vote for governor. I would like to, but yeah, I understand the federal level. I understand like the more like the state level, federal level. I'm asking for some representation just in Lexington.
So the issues
as a resident, like there was like a vote on raising taxes for a police station.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a say in that, but I am severely affected by it.
Okay.
If there is a raise, I'm not saying that I don't agree with a raise or do or don't agree, but the fact that there's no say and it affects my wallet.
Yeah.
Also with the school committee, I don't have a say, whereas my kids and a lot of other people with young children are in the school system who are not able to
I understand your
vote for
point.
school committee. So I'm not like talking on a federal level.
Right.
I'm talking purely on a local level, very simple.
Okay, I understand your
basic
point.
stuff. Yeah.
That would be then addressed on the local level to the select board.
That's why I'm
Okay.
asking you.
But I'm a state rep, so you would bring that to the select
Yeah,
board.
we have 5 selectmen, they're like mayors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, collectively they're like the mayor. Yes,
I don't
maybe.
know how long you're going to stay here, but
Thank you.
but
Yeah.
I want
Oh,
to
yeah.
attach to the doctor's
Yep.
mention of addition, and I was a registered nurse for 41 years, retired too. Addition is a big thing in our country. I want to know, why are we allowed so many medications advertised on TV? And they give you the best scenery, blue sky, water, everything, and then they give you 5 minutes. If you take it, you might get the contract, and you should be taking it. But they allow, why are we allowed all this medications on TV advertising?
You're asking about TV advertising, but that's still regulated by the FCC because that advertising goes outside of Massachusetts. So when you're seeing that, it's a federally regulated issue. So we could talk to Congressman Clark's office, but it's just
I
not.
guess it's democracy,
I
right?
hear what you're saying, but it's not my office that directly controls that. Do you have a question? Was there another one? Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes, so to echo to your concern, your issue, right? I can give you some example information here. So is that just recently in Winchester, they passed the bill to allow green card holders to vote local election in local election. I think that for Cambridge they also passed that as well.
As far as I know, they tried, but it didn't
But in
pass
in
because
Winchester,
the
Winchester
governor
is
has to agree to it. So all those things are laying on the
yeah.
governor's
So it's
desk.
all for local election.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, so that starts with going to the town clerk. That starts with town meeting.
Mhm.
It begins with the town. If something the town wants, then the town could pass a warrant article and then come to the state at that point. But the argument would first go to the
Yeah.
town, like you said.
but that's only limit to local election, not state level.
Right.
Or, but,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm asking for. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I do understand like how it's like build up and what steps you need to take. I'm just here to address the issue, and hopefully, people are listening, get some support. Since if I go to the town meeting, I'm not even allowed to vote in the town meeting. So I need support from people who are
You
actually
can start with
are. I'm not a member, and I'm not. Like,
I'm not either, but each of us has the right to go and express an opinion.
That's true. But
So
I
you
need,
can
I need,
speak
I need,
up
I
to
need
the
support.
school committee or anybody else.
I need support, so
Yep.
that's why I'm addressing the issue.
Yeah.
So
See,
that's
yeah.
all.
You need a warrant article
Yeah,
here
yeah.
to gather support
Mhm.
for that. But
Yeah.
I would go in and meet with whichever of the selectmen you want to, because they have office hours.
I know.
So
Yeah. I've
talk
been
to
in-
them
I've been
about
in
that
meetings. I've-
and
I'm in the
start
process.
there. Good, because then if you can gather support for a warrant article and it gets voted in town meeting, even though you won't be able to vote on it, then I believe there's a procedure where they then take a petition to the state. Right?
Yeah.
They go.
Right.
I'm not familiar with the exact procedure,
The
but
funny thing is, I even need like an American citizen to actually go to the town meeting. I need support. I cannot address this issue as a non-citizen. That's really like the weird loophole. But
well, you can address it as a voice, just not
yeah,
as a
that's
vote.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
But I think that's where you start, and if
Yeah.
you get, and you
I'll
might find
support
quite a
you.
lot of support.
I'll
Yeah.
support you
You
as a
got-
citizen,
oh, yeah.
and we have town meeting members here that could.
Yeah, I think you're likely to get support at town meeting, but you have to go through that process of getting a warrant article. And
I'm willing to go through the process.
if you're very quick, you can get on. I believe the warrant closes in 2 weeks. But I mean, if you're very quick, then you can get. And again, you have to check with the selectmen, but you have to have a certain number of signatures to
Yeah,
get
exactly.
a warrant article on
Exactly.
it. And I've forgotten how many that
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
if you do that, you can get it on the warrant for spring town meeting, or failing that, fall
Yeah.
town meeting.
So by the time I'm ready, I'll come back here to collect some signatures. Then.
Yeah.
That's good
You
to
have
know.
to be very quick if you're going to get on the
Okay.
I just
Springtime
wanted to say that I love the learning so much from you today and your in-depth study of many different areas. And you just reinforced that I did the right thing by voting for you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I really love what I do. I never thought
I
it'd be
guess
here.
that's going to be me.
Yeah.
And we
so-
always got a newsletter or an update from Michelle. Are we going to get one from you? I am a District 6.
Yeah. So
Appreciate it.
So if I'm not real good, I need to have someone. I need to hire someone.
Michelle Sakura, I get it from her.
Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah.
So I have one too.
Okay.
It's getting on there. So if you go to my website,
I can sign up for it.
repkengordon.org, you can sign up for it.
Okay, will do.
I don't know how to get it out to people that don't sign up for it. You know what I mean? I don't know how that link happens.
Ask Michelle for the list.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I can.
I can sign up.
Poor Michelle.
Share with her.
I stay right,
Yeah.
so I get every time email I get.
Yeah, I can especially. Yeah,
Or the
Okay.
tax bill, you can shove a little notice in the tax.
Yeah, people notice
Okay.
that. Representative Gordon, I think I'm the last one standing from the league, and we're
Okay.
getting to the end of our time. So maybe if you have one more question, and then we can wind
okay.
up.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Sure, my issue is medical aid and dying.
Yeah.
And I know you're in support. In fact, all the reps and senators from Lexington are in support, and the Board of Selectmen passed a resolution. They're in support.
Mhm.
And we've been trying for going on 11 years. Does everyone know it's when you're terminal and you have 6 months to live? 2 doctors have to evidence that, and then you you can request from your doctor medication to end your intolerable suffering at the end of life if you happen to be really suffering and fall asleep and die peacefully. So we've been trying, and we're gaining tons of momentum. 77% of Mass residents, according to Suffolk University and Boston Global, are in favor of it. What we want to do with our volunteers this session is get the legislative leadership in State House to do independent private polling of their Senate and House. And I think that, I know for a fact that will prove to the leadership there's overwhelming support that matches that poll of 77%, maybe even more, and that it should come to a vote this year.
Yeah, so and I know Representative Kafka filed that for a long time.
Correct.
And who is it now?
Well, no,
Is
we
it-
haven't chosen the new person where we filed, but it's been Brownsburger and Comfort and many, O'Day and,
Yeah, okay. So you
Yeah.
may file it again.
right.
You when you say a poll, I think you generally have, like you said, close to a majority of. I'm just speaking as a House member. I think you have mostly a majority of House members on it, because what you said really is the most important thing. Is this has to be requested consciously by the person who is suffering,
Sure.
who is terminal. Like you say, there are parameters to it. They have to. It's two doctors. Mental health.
Evaluation.
Because I've heard from some people who oppose it, examples of how people come out of a coma and then they live for years. This does not apply to somebody in a coma.
Correct.
It's a piece of misunderstanding that we often deal with. And we just in the last political campaign, we always see misinformation. And hopefully we become sophisticated and can think about the difference. But yeah, you must consciously request this. And then the mental health doctor has to confirm that you understand what it is that you're asking for and the consequences of it yourself, and that no one's influencing you. So, yes, you've had support. You've had my support for 10 years now. And leadership does know, when you say a poll, they see how many reps have signed on to it. So we'll continue that dialogue with current leadership.
But I mean more than just a sign on. I mean a behind the scenes private poll that is done all the time, I understand.
Yep.
Of the Senate, of the House.
Okay.
Just authorize it. And then see the data and say, oh my gosh, this will easily pass.
Okay.
If that's what I'm hoping you and Michelle and others will encourage your colleagues to do, is get that private poll.
All right. I'll talk to people around about it.
Thank you.
Representative Gordon, this has been very informative and very interesting, and I think we really appreciate the opportunity to get to know you now that you're going to be representing part of Lexington. And thank you.
Thank you.